Hi, everyone. I'm Tamron Hall. The News Nation is following the first day of the murder trial against George Zimmerman. There is heavy security outside the Sanford, Florida courthouse. The high-profile nature of this case obviously drawing this security, which sparked national conversation on race, guns, and Florida's controversial self-defense law when it made headlines a year ago. Well, right now, jury selection is underway. George Zimmerman was in the room as the first of the 500 potential jurors filed into the Sanford, Florida courthouse. George Zimmerman has pled not guilty to the murder of Trayvon Martin, claiming he shot the teenager in self-defense. After Martin attacked him, Martin was unarmed. The shooting sparked a major social media campaign, which led to protests in cities around the country. It also ultimately led to the resignation of the Sanford police chief. George Zimmerman has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in online donations for his legal defense fund. This morning at the courthouse, Trayvon Martin's family called for calm.
We also seek a fair and impartial trial. We ask that the community continue to stay peaceful as we place our faith in the justice system, and we ask that the community do the same.
And a short time later, George Zimmerman's brother Robert also made a public declaration from the courthouse.
The state doesn't have a case. Mr. O'Mara's gone on the record saying the state knows that they have a very weak case. I believe it's an improper charge altogether. I wish they would just withdraw it. Seeing as how that's not likely to happen now, I'm confident they're not going to meet their burden.
NBC's Carrie Sanders is in Sanford for us. So, Carrie, obviously so much about this case played out publicly in the court of public opinion, but right now it really is about the selection of these jurors.
And many say that that is the most critical part of winning or losing a case, and that's why this will be a particularly slow process. As you noted, the prospective jurors have been summoned. 100 of the first 500 came to the courthouse today. They were taken into a room where, like all jurors, prospective jurors, they're played a video and told about their civic responsibility and why we have a jury system in this country and what participating in it means. Then they were each given questionnaires, and in those questionnaires they're filling out information, biographical data, other questions, typical questions that, even though we don't have the questionnaire, could be, how much do you know about this case? And those questionnaires were then brought together and brought up to the attorneys, and the prosecutor and the defense have looked through those, they've sorted them out, and we're moving towards the process where each individual in that group of 100 will be brought into the courtroom, and they will be asked questions by the defense attorney and by the prosecuting attorney. And in the selection of this jury, and I should note, it's 6-member jury plus alternates. A lot of people think it will be 12, but in Florida, in a second-degree murder case, it's 6-member jury. They will have the option, the attorneys will have the option to say to the judge, I would like to exclude this person for cause, meaning that this person has said something that suggests that they're biased and they could not sit in fairness on this jury. The attorneys also have peremptory challenges where they could say, I want this person out, and they don't have to give a reason, they just want that person out. But they have a limited number of those challenges. So the plan is they will sort through, bring up 21 people, begin to ask those questions, and then bring in another 21, and then another 21, and go until they have the 6 jurors that both sides agree with, and the alternates. And it hasn't been announced by the court just yet how many alternates there will be. So we'll have to find out as the day progresses on that. But that's an idea of what's taking place now. This will continue until they actually get a jury. And as I mentioned, both sides say maybe 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks before they actually seat a jury to begin presenting the case and the defense.
Okay, thank you very much, Carrie. Joining me now, criminal defense attorney John Burris, former federal prosecutor Kendall Coffey, and Washington Post opinion writer and MSNBC contributor Jonathan Capehart. We also mentioned that George Zimmerman has sued NBC Universal, the parent company of this network, for defamation, and the company has strongly denied his allegations. Let me start off with the 2 attorneys here. John, first you. It's interesting, the defense again put in a motion to continue the trial, their 3rd attempt in a sense to delay the proceedings. What do you make of this last-ditch attempt once again by the defense to slow the process?
Well, it's not going to happen. I think it's really just to protect the record. I mean, there has been issues that they received discovery very late, and that therefore didn't have an opportunity to prepare adequately. But it has has been denied. It's just a record preparation matter to protect themselves, but it clearly will not be denied. I mean, it clearly will not be granted.
Kendall, the defense also raised concerns on the turning over of discovery from the state and whether it was done in a timely manner. What's behind that?
Defense has raised the issue, but what the judge's concern is at this point is whether the prosecution handled it right or wrong. Defense, do you have the information you need to have a fundamentally fair trial? Because if you do, we want to keep this thing on track, and we can deal with any allegations more specifically of prosecutorial misconduct after the trial. But meanwhile, the day has come. Let's go to trial.
The day has come, but we are still, again, Kendall, seeing a lot of that battle for public opinion. You have Trayvon Martin's parents asking for calm, George Zimmerman's brother as well, saying that his family has had threats, so on and so forth. Their concerns for him in receiving a fair trial, as they put it, but the jurors are there. They are filling out these questionnaires. How do you find a juror, and we ask this all the time with high-profile cases, Kendall, that don't have strong opinions, especially in a tight-knit community?
Well, you're not going to find jurors that are completely unaware of this case. Most of them have probably followed it closely. But the key thing is to find jurors that have an open mind and will consider and say they will consider just the evidence that's brought into the trial. There will be time and time again in high-profile cases where jurors have said, yes, I've read that, yes, I've watched this on television. The judge asks them then, can you be fair and impartial and judge this case solely on the evidence before you? The juror says, yes, absolutely, Your Honor. That juror may be allowed to serve.
The state and defense have received the copies of the questionnaires, and John, the defense asked for more time to review and categorize them, but the judge denied that request, indicating they will receive or be able to review issues as they arise. What do you believe are some of the questions, at least for the defense here? Are they asking about race? Do they want to make sure the questionnaire covers this adequately? Since, for example, we know that race plays a big part of this as much as the stand your ground law does.
This is a very important part of the trial. These questionnaires, having been involved in these questionnaires, it's important for the defendant to get every question out, the prosecution to get every question. And what they're really looking for is attitudes, because just because a person says they can be fair, that doesn't mean you believe them. Right. So racial attitudes that they have, stereotypic notions that they may have about African-American teenagers, private security firms, whether or not they've been involved in those, who they socialize with, do they have African-American friends, do they have people of different ethnic groups. These are that are part of their social milieu. Are they supervisors? Have they had to make decisions before about who gets a job? Have they had African-American bosses or Latin bosses? All these kind of things figure into, from the lawyer's point of view, is despite what the person says, can they really be fair? And that's a function of how you evaluate the question and the answer that they've given to these questions.
And I want to bring Jonathan in, but let me follow up again. John, obviously when it comes to race, the sensitivity of how you would ask this question, no one can be eliminated by race. And certainly you may have people who have prejudices or certain beliefs but are not racist, who could potentially still serve on the jury.
Absolutely, and this is the part that each side will have to explore, because the prosecution has to be concerned about people who have these racial stereotypic notions about black teenagers, and of course the defense wants to be concerned about people who think that he was a vigilante and he was operating out on his own, and so you have to explore these questions. That's why written questionnaires are great, right, because then the lawyers can then take a look at those, and then they can follow up with questions, and sometimes you can eliminate these people just between agreement and with the courts without having to ask these very explosive questions.
Jonathan, let me bring you in. We showed video at the top of the show of the security, the heavy security at that courthouse. The emotion involved in this are tremendous. You've written about it. You've even been, if you will, attacked by the attorneys representing George Zimmerman. You have people who have that pit in their stomach, the worry that the outcome of this trial could set off a firestorm, quite honestly, and folks are worried about that, Jonathan.
Yeah, and so are the Martin family. From the very beginning of this, they have said that all that they wanted at the beginning was an arrest of George Zimmerman, and then after that, a trial by a jury, and that they would live by the jury's decision. You know, remember, it took 44 days for George Zimmerman to be arrested, and in that time, there was a huge national outcry over how is it possible that an unarmed teenager could be killed by someone, and the person who admitted to doing it wasn't even charged with anything, and especially under the murky murky circumstances. So even though the national outrage has died down, the sort of red-hot passions that this case has embroiled, for lack of a better word, are still there. You can see, I see it on my Twitter feed. Every time I write about this in the comments section, the level of vitriol, but also passion that attends to this case is very, very real. And so I think the concern about what will happen as a result of this case is very is right and true. But I think having the Martin family call for calm from the very beginning, and then again today at the start of jury selection, is incredibly important.
Well, it is, and you talk about the national outrage. It's died down because we have been in this standstill, or standby, if you will. But as the attorneys both pointed out, this is the real deal. This is when it starts, and we will hear more. But you have others, who have tried to turn this into a political story. For example, Jonathan, we know that the president gave his heartfelt words that if he had a son, he would look like Trayvon. But we also know that George Zimmerman went on Fox News a lot because he felt that he got a sympathetic ear from conservatives. So we've seen this go from the courthouse to the neighborhoods to the barbershops where people talk about these things, all the way to Washington, D.C.
Right. And remember, the president, when he talked about the case, he was answering a specific question.
Sure.
It wasn't as if he went out there and said, "Hey, let me talk about this case." But what we've seen, and I'm glad you said this is the real deal. What's happening today is the real deal. What's happened up until this point has just been basically a PR tug of war between the Martin family and the Zimmerman family in trying to portray Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman in ways that are beneficial to each side. And the upside of all this is Florida's laws. The Stand Your Ground law is an insane law, but there are other laws in Florida that have actually made it possible for all of us to read the police reports, hear the 911 tapes, read autopsy reports, and see all the evidence that both the prosecution and the defense have. And so that way, I think that's why we're not going to be able to. The idea that they're going to have an impartial jury is sort of laughable. But I think it was Kendall who said this, that you want a jury that has an open mind, because we all know things right now that might not even be admitted in as evidence in the case. And so to have people on that jury who are willing to have an open mind and just consider the evidence that's presented to them at trial is going to be crucial.
And quickly, Kendall and John, your legal opinions, what should we look for in the next, 28, 48 hours, even a week, that it could take to seat this jury? Kendall?
Well, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult. There's going to be a lot of focus on pretrial publicity, the issue of whether they truly have open minds or not. What I think the defense is going to look for are going to be jurors that like their guns, that maybe have been crime victims. Probably bluntly, they're going to have a preference for white jurors. What the prosecution is going to look for is individuals who don't like the idea of private citizens walking around with guns and being willing to use them.
And John?
Yeah, I think that that's actually true, and I think from a prosecution's point of view, they have to be very mindful of the racial questions, the racial stereotyping issues. The defense themselves obviously are looking for Fox News type people who follow, and so I would be concerned in the questionnaires, really, what kind of news programs do you listen to? I've asked questions, MSNBC, Fox, various programs, to get a real sense of where people's political alliances are, because at the end of the day, can you believe them and can you trust them when they tell you they can be true? And that may not, just because they say it, don't mean you can't trust them.
John Burris, thank you. Kendall Coffey, Jonathan Capehart, great pleasure having you on as my panel this hour. Thank you.
Thanks, Tamara.